Yo, what's going on, everyone? It's Temo Sandoval. I'm the digital press manager here at UCLARadio.com, and I'm ecstatic to share this guest that we have with y'all. We have a legend, uh, multi-talented, multi-hyphenate, really spanning career, and on top of that, an LA native too. And as you're about to see, really brings the drip. So I'm very excited to talk about his upcoming album. Our guest today is Adrian Younge. He just released his brand new album, The American Negro, on Amazon Music, along with a podcast series of interviews talking about the Black American experience and oppression throughout America. You released it at the end of Black History Month, and you also have a short film coming up, right?
Yes, T.A.N.
Tan.
Yes.
So if you want to like give us a little bit of like a summary of what this project means to you and like how it feels to be releasing it right now, that'd be so great.
Well, yeah, it's good to talk to you. So the American Negro is the album, and there's companion pieces to the album because there's a podcast, like you said, on Amazon Music called Invisible Blackness, and then there's a short film that's going to be released on Amazon called T.A.N. So American Negro, Invisible Blackness, and T.A.N. But the nucleus of this world is the American Negro. So the American Negro is basically an unapologetic critique on the malevolent psychology that has been used to create a denigrating ideology against people of a darker hue. It's an album that really explains the ideology of racism and how these ideologies have fermented complacency towards inequities that we've been feeling for centuries. So I just break it down through monologues and music, break it down from the perspective where you can't deny what's going on. And I'm basically trying to do it, I did it to connect the dots to the past, showing you how the machinations of the past still greatly affect us in the future.
I mean, first and foremost, anyone who's reading this or listening to this, definitely go listen to this album. It is, bro. I've just been listening to it like, it's been like I think like 2.5 weeks now since your reps reached out to me and sent me the early link. Shout out to them for doing that, and just the like replayability and all the clear details through it are like, I mean, that's if anyone who's familiar with your work, that's like I think what you do so well is your not only when you're scoring films, but you're just your cinematic lens and approach to music in general, and like the nuance and the scapes of it. I just kind of wanted to backtrack a little bit. We said at the top you're an LA native, and I think it's really interesting to think about the differences, right, that we see when we talk about the experience of Black folks between living in the North and living in the South. And so I think if you could talk a little bit about your experience, like growing up as a Black man in Los Angeles, as opposed to like Montgomery, Alabama, and like the different kind of both like the struggles and like the obstacles that you face is that, and also how you think that like shaped your approach to music.
Well, it's interesting because my father was in the military, so we actually moved around a lot. So um, I lived at 2 years old. I lived in Alabama. I lived in upstate New York for a few years in elementary, but most of my life was here in Southern California. And what I realized in seeing America is that Black culture has always been dichotomized. It's always been separate. It's always been its own thing. And I always feel like the heart of Black American culture has always really been in the South, you know? But the diaspora is still part of the Black psyche, the Black consciousness. And in Southern California, you're Black and your other friends are Mexican, or Latino. So, or even Filipino, or Asian, whatever it may, and white, So like, I say this all to say that you're either light or dark. And in Southern California, you learn how to assimilate. That's something I really learned in my travels as a youth, how to be in a classroom of all white people, being the only black kid. You know, I had to learn how to assimilate. And then moving to Southern California, being, you know, the only, you know, two or three, you know, the second or third black kid in the class that's filled with just whites and Mexicans. But like, you just learn how to assimilate. And I don't, you know, it didn't affect me in a way where, you know, I felt like any kind of crazy personal racism every single day, because the racism that I feel is something that is not a brazen thing. It's not a pervasive thing. It's not like it once was. It's more institutionalized. It's more structural. Nevertheless, it's still there. It still reverberates, and it's still felt.
Totally. I think you speak on it perfectly of like just like the way the North, like, you know, white liberals in the North have like mythologized this idea that like, oh, racism's gone, but it's just like exactly like you said, it's taken on like a different mask and a different face. I really like what you said about how, you know, having that experience as a young man of like seeing around the world and seeing, or around the country, and seeing these different kind of perspectives and environments, and like almost like different kind of different like boxes of existence you'd have to occupy as a black person. And I think it's you can also see that like um intranational like lens with like all the collaborations you've had. Like you're not just like collaborating with West Coast artists, even though like you've worked with Kendrick Lamar. You made, I'd say, like my favorite song on my favorite Schoolboy album, John Muir, that's from you. You worked with Souls of Mischief, but you've also worked with Jay-Z. You've worked with Ghostface and the Wu-Tang, Prodigy. How
Yeah.
would you say like you know, because with hip hop especially, there's such a connection to regional sound and like established sound. So as a solo artist yourself, how would you say like approaching with your sound and coming into working with artists with such other established sounds and experiences of being like black folks across the country? How do you think that like comes together, I guess?
Well, there is something homogenous when it comes to the music of minorities in America, and it's that we make music with soul.
Mhm.
So as long as it's soulful, you're connected to the ancestors and you're speaking the same language, right? So being a you know, growing up on the West Coast, I was that dude that loved East Coast stuff, but I love West Coast stuff at the same time. So my influences really came from vinyl culture because I'm a DJ also. And on the East and on the West, they were still sampling the same records. They all sampled Bob James Nautilus. They all sampled James Brown, you know. But it's how the sample was manifested, what happened to it, and these perspectives. So, I mean, as a black artist, I just, as I say on the album, the musician is a document, and it's the oral transcription of my sound. But my sound is connected to generations, and that's just soul. And same with these other artists I'm working with. We're just making soul music.
I love that. I like that's just such a great point to like talk about the overarching and like the, you know, the deep rooted through line of all the different sounds. I think that's really interesting too that you bring up vinyl culture. And yeah, I've been going through like all of your different interviews and seeing you. It was super interesting to see. I watched your Amoeba and I think it was a Fuse TV one, and you pull out a Gil Scott Heron record and another record where I'm like, oh, this feels very much like what he's like evoking on this album. And so I think with that, right? Like, would you say then like that your main lens, like as an artist or like as a creative, is kind of like, you know, as a hip hop head, as like a crate digger, like that's kind of how you're seeing things like first is like through that lens, whether it's, you know,
Yeah,
your
I,
something.
I, yeah. I approach music through the vantage point that hip hop provided me. And hip hop taught me about the break. Hip hop taught me about the illest part of this song or that song, and how you could turn that song into something that the original artist would have never thought about. But in viewing that music that way, I became the break because I started making those musics. Everything I do is live instruments. There is no sampling. So I started making music from those perspectives and continuing the conversations of yesterday, but for today, in a way that hip hop has taught me.
I love that. I love especially like we talked about at the top, the way you're approaching this album in different mediums, and just kind of like I feel like that's a very like hip hop approach to kind of be like, you know, albums are typically done this one way. Let me do it the way I think of it, and like I want to do my flip on it. Um,
Absolutely.
100%. And I think that's something that like shines through the whole project altogether. Like despite the, you know, the obvious weight of the subject matter and the anguish and the, you know, the reality of the oppression that you're talking about, there's still this sense of like defiance, like resilience, and like I think let me see right here. There's this, I wrote it down, this like run of tracks on the album is just like really crazy. Where's it going? America is Listening, The March on America, and The Paradox of Positive just especially stood out to me. But I feel like throughout the whole album, all these songs have this like forward momentum. Like it's, you know,
Yeah.
despite the pain, it's still going forward, and there's still like a sense of, you know, a light on the end of the tunnel. And so I
Yeah.
guess I would ask like, what makes you think, aside from just necessity, what has been like at the heart of like the Black community's ability to like endure? And for you specifically, like where do you find hope and like a reason to keep going?
Well, it's what it is that the Blacks were brought to America as property, as chattel. And after this chattel system was abolished, we developed into being the problem of America, right? The bastard child of America. And in becoming that problem, we had to learn how to not be the victims, but be the survivors. So I guess if you're looking at it from a Darwinian perspective, we had, you know, the strongest survive, and we had to have strength, and we had to have posterity. We had to understand the perennial injustices that we were facing, but we had to know that there was a light at the end. So you're right, and uh, it's very intelligent of you to understand the structure of the album, how it goes into this darkness and then it goes into this light. Like you're right, I did structure it that way, and you know that's why when people listen to it, I want them to be kind of on this roller coaster ride of perspective.
Well, I mean, that's I would say as I'm just some guy, but like as someone who listened to it, I would say you definitely accomplished that. And also listening to the podcast series as well in companion, definitely adds to like the fleshed out nature. And I'm really looking forward to the short film, because I know like you have your own history in scoring film, so I think your whole like direction and main, you know, in the cockpit take will be really interesting to see. Um, on the, you know, on the theme of things that are upcoming, right now you're in a band, the Midnight Hour, with the legendary Ali Shaheed Muhammad from A Tribe Called Quest. I actually saw y'all, I think like 2 years ago at the Lodge Room. You were doing like a free show and you had Black Dot come
Oh,
through.
okay. Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
was so crazy. It was amazing to see y'all live. You guys launched the Jazz is Dead record label together, and you've been releasing different albums, collaborations with legendary jazz artists of the past. I think another track just came out like last night or something.
Eric Arts.
Yes, that one just came out, and the full album's releasing next month.
Mhm.
How do you continue to like stay so inspired and like keep, you know, innovating and like flipping it on its head? I guess that kind of ties back to the hip hop head perspective. And like, do you have anything else that you're like looking forward to, or that you're already like, oh, on to the next idea, or are you trying to like let this one kind of marinate?
Well, I live life doing what I love, right? So I had to struggle for a while until I could make enough money to do what I wanted to do every single day. Some people just struggle for the rest of their life, or struggle till they retire and then struggle in retirement. Um, I live life with a smile on my face because the work I do every day means something. But nothing means more to me at this moment creatively than the American Negro, because it's not really about the music, it's about the message. And I want the message to be able to uplift people and edify our consciousness, and just have an egalitarian, sense of pride in the fact that we are all humans loving each other. You know what I'm saying? So like that means more than anything to me, but it doesn't mean that other things don't mean a lot to me too. The Gary Bart's album means a lot to me. All the Jazz Dead stuff that Ali and I do means a lot, but the one thing that I want people to play for their children, for their parents, for their grandparents, is the American Negro, because it's an album that is more than just music. It's a message.
I mean, that was a fantastic. I think that's a great closing. Is there? We don't want to take up much more of your time. Thank you so much for like being willing to do this, and shout out to your agency for contacting us. Is there any like final thoughts you wanted to share before we signed off to the people?
I would just say the final thought is that for all you people out there, for all you artists, please make sure you use your voice, because you don't realize how powerful your voice is until you use it. You don't have to yell. You just have to be able to intelligently deliver what it is that you want to say, and we all have the ability to do that. So continue to believe in yourself, because there's no better version than you. And this is Adrian Younge. Thank you for having me, and I'm out.
Yo, once again, shout out to our guest, Adrian Younge. If you're at home watching this, give him a round of applause. This was super sick. This has been UCLAradio.com. Super excited to have this artist.
Thank you, brother.